into a more and more racist worldview. Why is it that my kids' school told us it was essential that students learn to acknowledge racial differences? And why was I encouraged to join a school-sponsored racial affinity group to bond with people who share my skin color? My name is Bayan Bartning. In late 2020, my wife and I pulled our two young children, ages 7 and 10, out of Riverdale Country School in New York City, the only grade school they have ever known. My skin is brown because I'm half Mexican and Yaqui, an indigenous tribe native to the US-Mexico border region, and half Jewish. I always felt that made me a pretty normal American. My wife came to North America as a refugee from the former Soviet Union. She spent the first 5 years of her life in an intolerant society where her group identity as a Jew was stamped in her government documents. I have always felt a strong connection with Martin Luther King Jr.'s dream of an America where people will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. We're not there yet, but MLK's dream is also my dream. I know based on my own lived experience that racial and ethnic division is healed by recognizing our common humanity. We are all part of the same human race. When Riverdale started teaching its students and families that we should pay more attention to skin color and even choose our social relationships based on skin color, I was deeply troubled. I wanted to understand what was going on and started to ask questions. What I found shocked me. A new intolerant orthodoxy opposed to Martin Luther King's pro-human and inclusive philosophy has gained widespread influence. Much of it is rooted in academic philosophy, critical theorists pushing for socially constructed identity groups to battle in a zero-sum conflict for power. Some of it is rooted in separatist movements, intentionally fighting racism with racism. This backward belief system teaches people to see race as real, and that our institutions should be required to discriminate based on skin color. Rather than seeing people as fundamentally human, focusing on our shared characteristics, the new orthodoxy forces us to see ourselves and each other as fundamentally defined by immutable characteristics, like skin color, and not by what MLK described as our unique human personality. Unfortunately, the new orthodoxy is pushed with emotionally manipulative thought reform practices, misrepresenting itself as anti-racist when it is really teaching racism, falsely calling those who question it racist, and being taught as fact rather than opinion to students at all age levels around the country, as well as in corporate America. Sadly, millions of people who answer the call to be anti-racist are being steeped into a more and more racist worldview. And this ideology, which some have described as a religion, has devastating effects on those assimilated into it. It teaches some people that their skin color dooms them to negative life outcomes, instilling pessimism and despair. Psychologists call this learned helplessness. It prevents people who could improve their station in life from having the self-confidence to do so, causing depression and anxiety disorders. Meanwhile, those with similar life experiences, but with a healthier worldview and the belief that they can succeed despite obstacles put in their way, experience substantially lower rates of depression and anxiety and better life outcomes, having the courage and confidence to bring their belief to reality. Psychologists call this learned optimism. This new orthodoxy that has falsely claimed the mantle of anti-racism is in fact anti-humanity. Rather than treat everyone fairly, it asks us to treat people differently based on the circumstances of their birth. Rather than inspiring leaders to bring people together, it requires leaders to divide us. Instead of gratitude, it teaches grievance. Instead of forgiveness, it teaches our children to drink the poison of resentment. A spiral of silence has emerged, in which the countless people who reject this cynical worldview are afraid to speak out. In the absence of those willing to speak the truth in their schools, workplaces, and communities, this ideology has grown more and more powerful. I am not an activist. I'm just a father who couldn't stand by and let this orthodoxy destroy everything that I value and know to be true. We need to end the spiral of silence. Even if we have positive intentions in teaching people to obsess about skin color, we know from history the damage that way of thinking has caused. It can only lead to a society where everyone is tribal and everyone is racist. There is a better way than the path offered by those who would take us backward. It is not enough just to be anti-racist. We also need to be pro-human. To end racism and intolerance, we need to embrace the scientific fact that there is only one human race. We need to advocate for universal civil rights and liberties and compassionate opposition to racism and intolerance rooted in dignity and our common humanity. That's why I decided to start the Foundation Against Intolerance and Racism, to reinvigorate a common culture of fairness, understanding, and humanity in the spirit of my heroes, Dr. Martin Luther King, Frederick Douglass, and Abraham Lincoln. There is an urgent need to reaffirm and advance the core principles of the civil rights movement. This isn't an issue of left versus right. The defining question of our time is, how do we break through the demonization and division and find the courage to move forward together as Americans? Join us in the pro-human movement at fairforall.org.